Have you ever paused, maybe looked at something incredibly complex, like the gears in a really nice watch, maybe a huge skyscraper, or even just, how a single living cell works, and found yourself wondering, how did this actually happen? Was it all just like random chance, or does it maybe hint at something? Well, something more, something designed. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, our mission is to dig into exactly that question. We're exploring a really fascinating conversation with Dr. Mark, who's a satellite engineer, and Dr. Mark believes the universe is just full of evidence for design. It's a perspective that, honestly, it challenges some common views and makes you think hard about how we interpret the world.
Yeah. And our source for this deep dive is basically this discussion Dr. Mark had where he, really connects his engineering work building these complex satellites to the complexity he sees in nature. So the big question guiding us is really, what specific things, according to Dr. Mark anyway, really point towards intelligent design in the universe?
It's a fundamental question, isn't it? And Dr. Mark points out something interesting. We look at, say, a vase of flowers. We all agree someone made the vase, right? No question. But then we're often told the flowers themselves, which are incredibly complex biologically, are purely down to, well, accidents, random processes over long, long periods. But what if the evidence for design in nature is actually, even stronger than for the things we humans make?
That's a really sharp distinction to start with. It kind of sets the stage for looking at things differently. So let's get into Dr. Mark's first big point. It tackles the sheer improbability of complex stuff just happening by chance. He uses this analogy that really hits home. He says, imagine the entire solar system, and it's packed, absolutely packed, with blind people, and they're all just randomly shuffling Rubik's Cubes. Okay. Now, the probability of just one essential life protein assembling randomly, it's like all of them, all those blind people, solving their cubes at the exact same moment.
Yeah, he actually calls that level of improbability ridiculous. It's not just unlikely, it's an extraordinarily improbable arrangement of things.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it another way. You're walking on a beach, right? And you find pebbles arranged perfectly. Like a circle, 2 dots inside, a line underneath, a face. You'd instantly think someone did that. You wouldn't think, oh, the wind and waves must have done it.
Right. Your intuition just screams design.
Exactly. And why? Because if it was random, you'd expect to see faces made of pebbles all over the beach, wouldn't you? And you just don't. It seems like we're kind of wired to spot design.
That's a good point about intuition. But what about the argument, give it enough time? Couldn't those pebbles eventually make a face just by pure chance over millions of years? How does Dr. Mark handle that?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. Dr. Mark actually argues that time often works against things getting more complex. It's kind of the enemy here. He brings up the second law of thermodynamics entropy. Basically, in a closed system, things tend towards disorder over time. They break down. So if you started with that pebble face, time and random chance would actually be much more likely to mess it up, to scatter the pebbles, not create or maintain it.
Huh. So the very thing, vast amounts of time that many people rely on to explain complexity, Dr. Mark suggests it might actually do the opposite, push things towards decay.
That's his point. It directly challenges that common assumption. Time doesn't automatically build things up. Often it tears them down. It leads to unraveling, getting worse.
That's a huge shift in perspective. It reminds me of another story he mentioned from a U.S. court case about ballot papers.
Oh, yeah, the ballot paper case. It's quite telling. A county clerk was accused of fixing the ballot order because over decades, like 40 out of 41 elections, one particular party always ended up listed first. They claimed it was random selection.
But the odds of that happening randomly were calculated as, what was it, something insane, like 1 in 50 billion?
Exactly, 1 in 50 billion. And the key thing is, the legal system looked at that extreme improbability and said, nope, that's not chance. They convicted the clerk based on the statistics.
Right. So the legal system accepts that level of improbability as evidence against randomness.
But then, Dr. Mark points out, some scientific viewpoints seem hesitant to accept similar or even much greater improbabilities as evidence for design in nature. He calls this philosophical blindness. The idea is if you start with a fixed belief, like, say, assuming there's absolutely no God or designer involved, then you automatically limit your possible explanations. You have to find a naturalistic answer, even if the odds or even the laws of physics like entropy seem to work against it.
So your starting assumptions can kind of filter the evidence you're willing to see.
That's the argument. It might lead you to overlook possibilities, even if time itself seems to argue against the process you're proposing.
And deal with these, frankly, staggering probabilities.
Dr. Mark mentions a sort of rescue mechanism that sometimes comes up, the multiverse idea.
Ah, yes, the multiverse. The idea that there are maybe infinite universes out there, and we just happen to be the lucky one where everything randomly fell into place correctly for life.
Right. So it solves the probability problem by just saying, well, with infinite chances, anything can happen somewhere.
Precisely. It's presented as a way around the staggeringly low odds of life arising by chance. But Dr. Mark's critique is pretty sharp here. He basically calls it philosophical nonsense. Why? Because it's completely devoid of observational evidence. We can't see other universes. We can't test for them. By definition, we're stuck in this one.
So it's more of a philosophical idea than a scientific one.
He argues it's mainly a way to defend a purely naturalistic worldview, to avoid concluding there's an intelligent designer, rather than something demanded by the actual scientific data we can observe.
Okay, so that covers the challenge from probability. Let's move to Dr. Mark's second main point, which is about information, specifically purposeful information. What's he getting at there?
This is another really fascinating angle. He defines information not just as, random data, but as coded instructions. Instructions that are specifically set up to reduce uncertainty or increase understanding. Think about reading a book. The information isn't really in the physical ink and paper, is it?
No, it's in how the letters are arranged, the words, the sentences.
Exactly. The arrangement of the ink forms letters, which form words, which follow grammar rules, all based on a shared language and meaning between the writer and you, the reader. Fundamentally, it's an idea starting in one mind, getting encoded, sent, decoded, and hopefully understood by another mind.
That makes sense. The arrangement matters more than the medium. We do that all the time when we communicate.
And here's the kicker. Dr. Mark really stresses this. Information itself is abstract. It's non-material. You can't measure out, say, a kilogram of English or, 2 meters of meaning. It doesn't have physical dimensions.
Right. Which poses a bit of a problem if you believe only the material world exists.
That's the challenge he raises, because information is everywhere in our language, our computers, our DNA, but it's not actually a physical thing. It's conceptual.
So he breaks down information into different levels. I remember something about a message, please send money.
Yes. He uses Dr. Wundergit's 5 levels of information, using the very practical example. It built up. First, you have statistical. This is just like a random jumble of letters, maybe the same length as please send money. A satellite engineer might care about the number of bits transmitted, but not what they mean. Getting that specific sequence randomly is like guessing a super long PIN, maybe 24 digits. Tiny probability.
Okay, just random sequence.
Second, syntactical. Now, the letters follow rules, a code, like English grammar. Specific letters have to be in specific orders to even form potential words.
So it has structure now.
Third, semantic. This is where it actually means something. Please send money is grammatically correct and conveys a clear meaning. We understand the message.
Meaning emerges. Got it.
Fourth, pragmatic. This level causes an action. If his dad gets the message and actually sends the money, that action is the pragmatic result.
The message leads to doing something.
They're finally fifth, apopetics, which means purposeful. This is the why behind the message, the reason for sending it, needing money for something specific. And according to Git and Dr. Mark, this level, this purpose, can only come from a mind, from intelligence. It doesn't just happen randomly.
Wow. And applying that to biology, DNA isn't just a sequence, it's code with a clear purpose. Build and maintain a living thing.
Exactly. It's information operating at that highest level, apopetics. It's for the purpose of the organism's thriving and development. It's not just random chemical sequences.
And this leads to some pretty strong statements, theorems about information.
Yes. Gets 2 theorems, which Dr. Mark highlights. 1, information always requires an initial mental source. It's fundamentally mental, not material. 2, information cannot arise from purely statistical, random processes. Chance alone can't create meaningful, purposeful code.
Those sound like pretty direct challenges to explanations that rely solely on unguided natural processes for the origin of life's complexity. How is that generally received in the scientific community?
Well, as Dr. Mark puts it, these ideas are very uncomfortable for purely naturalistic worldviews. If your starting point is absolutely no God, no designer, then these theorems are a real problem because they point squarely towards an intelligent mind being necessary for information.
So what happens?
He suggests that often they're simply ignored, set aside, because engaging with them directly means confronting the possibility of an intelligence behind information, which contradicts that core naturalistic assumption.
Interesting how philosophical commitments can shape which scientific ideas get traction. Okay, let's move on to the third element Dr. Mark talks about, optimal trade-offs. His engineering background must really come into play here.
Oh, absolutely. This is where his experience designing satellites gives him a unique lens. He explains that building a spacecraft, especially something like a communication satellite, is all about balancing competing needs. It's a constant juggling act. For instance, you need a lot of power for broadcasting signals, right? That means big solar panels. But you also need heavy batteries to keep things running when the satellite goes into Earth's shadow, sometimes for over an hour, maybe 72 minutes.
And bigger panels and heavier batteries mean more mass.
Exactly. More mass means you need a bigger, much more expensive rocket to launch it. So engineers are always making trade-offs. Power versus weight, capability versus cost, performance versus reliability. It's this constant challenge of optimal balance, finding the sweet spot, the best compromise.
And he sees this same kind of smart balancing act in nature.
Definitely. He points to things like the human knee joint. It's basically a sophisticated four-bar mechanism. It allows for an incredible range of motion, but also has to be incredibly strong and stable. The way the ligaments are arranged is just optimal for that function.
Or the eye, maybe.
The eye is a fantastic example. And not just one design, but multiple highly optimized designs. You've got refractive eyes like ours with the lens, the iris adjusting light, the retina, the optic nerve sending signals to a dedicated part of the brain. Super complex. But then you also have completely different designs like reflective eyes in lobsters, which use an array of tiny mirrors. The source mentions that eyes seem to have evolved supposedly something like 30 separate times, each time achieving a remarkable level of optimization for its environment.
It's no wonder engineers often look to nature for ideas, that whole field of biomimicry. It feels like they're recognizing a superior design already exists.
That's a great point. Think about airplane winglets. Those turned-up tips on wings. They were inspired by the way eagles adjust their wingtip feathers to reduce drag and turbulence. It makes planes more fuel efficient. Or consider the gecko's foot. It's mind-bogglingly complex. Millions of microscopic hairs called spatulae. So tiny they interact with surfaces at the molecular level using van der Waals forces. That's how they can walk upside down. It's not just sticky. It's an incredibly sophisticated adhesion system, not accidental.
It seems like believing in a designer might actually encourage deeper investigation, too.
Dr. Mark makes that exact point. If you believe something was designed, you're motivated to ask why it's designed that way. What's the purpose? You assume there is a reason. Whereas if you assume it's just an accident of evolution, maybe you're less inclined to dig for a specific purpose. You might just say, well, it happened to work out that way. He notes that many pioneering scientists, like Johannes Kepler, were driven by their faith, by the idea of thinking God's thoughts after him.
Okay, so optimization points to design. What's the next piece? Something about correct components and assembly.
Yes, the fourth element, having the right parts put together in the right way. This leads into the idea of irreducible complexity. Think about building that satellite again. You only include the parts you absolutely need, right?
Right.
And crucially, someone has to assemble them correctly. It requires intelligence.
You can't just shake the box and hope a satellite pops out.
Exactly. He uses a Lego analogy, too. You can tip a whole box of Legos out, but you won't get a functioning model just by randomly sticking bricks together. Assembly takes intelligence, or his slightly graphic frog example.
Oh, right, the blender. Not for the squeamish.
Definitely not. But the point is, if you blend a frog, you still have all its molecules, all its chemical components. But you don't have a frog anymore. A frog isn't going to leap out of the blender.
Because the organization, the assembly, is gone.
Precisely. All the right parts are there, but the intelligent arrangement is destroyed. And this ties into irreducible complexity. Michael Behe popularized this idea, often using a mousetrap as an example. A simple mousetrap has several parts: the base, the spring, the hammer, the holding bar, the catch. If you take away any one of those parts, it doesn't just work poorly, it doesn't work at all.
All the parts have to be there and assembled correctly right from the start.
Yes, and applying that back to the eye, it's useless until all the main components are present and working together. Lens, retina, optic nerve, the brain's processing center. A half-formed eye offers no survival advantage. It just doesn't work.
So how does that fit with the idea of gradual evolution through natural selection?
Well, Dr. Mark emphasizes that natural selection is real, but it works by selecting from genetic information that already exists. It doesn't create brand new complex information or systems from scratch. In fact, he argues it can often be a downhill process genetically. Think about purebred dogs. They often have more genetic problems and deficiencies than mutts because selective breeding narrows the gene pool. It's losing information, not gaining it.
But haven't some argued that complex systems could evolve using temporary supports, like scaffolding?
Yes, Richard Dawkins proposed that kind of idea. Like maybe simpler structures acted as a scaffold while the more complex system evolved, and then the scaffold disappeared. But Dr. Mark's response is sharp. Who builds the scaffold? Doesn't building a scaffold itself require foresight, planning, intelligence, a purpose?
Ah, so the explanation itself seems to imply design.
That's his point. Natural selection doesn't have foresight. It can't decide it needs an arch and then build a temporary support structure. Scaffolding implies a mind, an intention, which is exactly what natural selection lacks.
Okay, we've covered improbability, information, optimization, and assembly. That's a lot of ground. But Dr. Mark mentioned a fifth aspect, something about beauty.
Yes, and this one is perhaps more subjective, but he feels it's a powerful fifth evidence of design. It's the aesthetic dimension. He contrasts it again with his engineering work. Satellites are built for function, period. Nobody cares if the wiring harness follows the golden ratio or the battery colors blend nicely. Does it work? That's the only question.
Right, pure utility.
But in nature, he argues, we see beauty that seems to go way beyond mere functionality. It's like artistry for its own sake. Think about the patterns on a butterfly's wings, the colors of a sunset, the intricate structure of a snowflake, the sheer variety and beauty of trees and foliage.
It does feel like there's an extra layer there, something not strictly necessary for survival. You mentioned the source referencing Genesis.
Yeah, Genesis 2, where it describes trees being created that were pleasing to the eye. A tree needs to photosynthesize, needs roots, needs to reproduce it, has functions. But does it need to be beautiful in the way that it often is, with beautiful bark textures or autumn colors?
Probably not, from a purely functional standpoint.
Exactly. So Dr. Mark suggests this points towards a creator who isn't just an engineer, but also an artist, a being who appreciates and creates beauty. And the fact that we appreciate beauty, that we create art, music, poetry, things that aren't strictly necessary for survival, might be, as the source suggests, a reflection of being made in the image of such a creator.
That's a really interesting thought. And he mentioned this beauty persists even in a flawed world.
Yes. He touches on the idea, drawing from his theological perspective, that even after thousands of years considering the fall and the effects of entropy, things breaking down, devolving, the world still retains extraordinary beauty, which makes you wonder, what must the original creation have been like?
And there's a future aspect too.
Right. The source material concludes that point by mentioning the biblical hope of a new heaven and a new earth, which the Bible describes as being beautiful beyond our current imagination.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. We've gone through Dr. Mark's arguments, these hallmarks of design he sees everywhere. First, the incredible improbability of complexity arising by chance, the Rubik's Cube analogy. Second, purposeful, coded information, like in DNA, which seems to require a mind. Third, the amazing optimal trade-offs and elegant engineering solutions we see in nature, like the knee or the eye. Fourth, the need for the right parts assembled in the right way, irreducible complexity. And finally, this pervasive sense of beauty that goes beyond just what's needed to function.
And when you put all those together, Dr. Mark's conclusion is pretty straightforward. If you see clear evidence of design, intricate function, information, optimization, beauty, then logically, there must be a designer. It's a principle we apply without hesitation to anything humans make. He argues it applies just as strongly, if not more so, to the universe itself and the life within it.
It definitely forces you to think about your own assumptions, doesn't it? How your own worldview might shape how you interpret all this complexity around us.
Absolutely. And maybe a final thought to leave listeners with, connecting back to that scaffolding idea we discussed earlier. If, as Dr. Mark argues, the very act of planning and building even a temporary scaffold implies a mind with a purpose, well, what does the intricate scaffolding of the entire universe, the laws of physics, the fine-tuning, the conditions for life, imply about its ultimate origin?
That's certainly something to chew on. We really encourage you to continue your own deep dive into these huge questions. Maybe look more into irreducible complexity, or information theory, or even just think about how worldviews shape science. Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive.